surreal. Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is an 11. I've been coming to the Music Box since I was a college student, and the thought of showing a film of mine on this screen just blows my mind. Thank you to everyone at the festival for holding our slot open for a year and a half. We really wanted to screen this in front of an audience rather than virtual because it's just a movie that is best on a big screen with an audience and beautiful sound. So thanks so much for coming out today. I don't want to yak too much, so just two things. Number one, Barry Gifford is in the house. Please give it up for an amazing American writer. This is the first trip he's taken since the lockdown, so it's really special for him to be here. Second, just wanted to let you know that I was really following Tarkovsky's advice when I made this film. He once said that the first 20 minutes of the film should be slower so that anyone who accidentally wandered into the wrong theater had the chance to leave and not disrupt the experience. So I hope that you do stick around because really looking forward to the Q&A afterwards, and thanks again for coming.
We're down to 2 mics, so if you guys want one, just let me know. Otherwise, I have a very loud voice. It's great to have you both here because I've never actually spoken to you both at once. It was always separately in the interviews. And just to take full advantage of you both being here at the same time, I'd love to ask, from both of your perspectives, how did this relationship, how did this collaboration between the both of you really form in a very sort of organic way?
Well, I was a fan, and once upon a time there was this great blog called Chicagoist, who some of you may remember, and I wrote movie reviews and interviews and basically whatever tickled my fancy. And one day out of the blue, I came across Barry's website, and I thought, I'll send him an email and see if he wants to do an interview. So he did. So we did a phone interview, and then I think it was about a year later, Barry came to town for a event at the Steppenwolf, Nelson Algren Live, which was kind of a celebration of Algren's life. And
I think you can stream that on Apple Plus if anyone's interested.
Yes.
It's apparently a great show. Willem Dafoe's in that as well.
And so I offered to kind of chauffeur him around while he was in the city. And he said, oh, you know, I'd like to kind of see some of my places from my childhood. So I drove him around, and he was basically doing a nonstop narration of, oh, this is where I went to school, this is where my house was. And somehow in the back of my mind, that must have, you know, sparked something, because when it came time to make a film about Chicago, I thought that would be a really great way into that time and place.
Absolutely, and I'd like to hear from Barry. Barry had a very particular way of agreeing to this project happening, because he's had some documentaries made about him in the past. I'd love to ask what that conversation was in terms of getting this project made.
Well, first I just want to thank Rob for pulling off something that I thought was pretty much impossible, because I gave him a number of parameters about making a film, and there'd been a couple of feature documentaries made in France and Italy, mostly talking heads, very standard kind of things. And so when Rob proposed doing a documentary about me in America, I said no. I wasn't interested in it. So then it just like a couple of days later, I started thinking about it, and I said, well, you know, I've got all these Roy stories all now collected in a book called Roy's World. And I said to Rob, all right, I'll let you do it, but it has to be about Roy, the character that I created, not about myself. how do I do that? Rob said, you know, I mean, he can explain it to you. But I said, no, I don't want to do it. It's just got to be Roy's life. Because everything that I have to say is embodied in these stories about this particular time in my life and the time in Chicago, the history of a time and place that no longer exists. And I thought, if he could pull it off, it would be pretty remarkable. And so when he went ahead, he did it, you know, we cooperated to some degree, but it was really his brainchild. And when he brought it out to the West Coast to show it to me, the initial version, I thought, okay, I'll go to see it and I'll say, you know, thanks, good job, let's go have a beer. But that's not what happened at all. I was really surprised that he was able to so gracefully, impressionistically put together this film. And it truly is Roy's world. It's about him. And so in that case, I was overwhelmed and really struck in a way that I didn't think was possible. So this project started out with my saying no. And here you all are, and thank you for joining in, and all the credit goes to Rob Christopher.
I really think one of the great achievements of this film is when you're, you know, bringing visual life to great, you know, writing like this. You know, it's easy to just kind of make it redundant. We're just going to kind of visualize exactly what we're hearing. But what I love here is that you find, as was said, impressionistic visuals that, for me, work on my senses almost like a guided meditation. It never overpowers the imagery that Barry's writing is already achieving, and especially in the animated sequences. If you want to single out both of those animators for Chicago, Illinois, 1953 and Bad Girls, those particular ones, very original animation. Just talk a bit about, again, that approach of how you really wanted the writing to speak for itself in this.
Well, Barry thought maybe he thought he was making life difficult for me when he gave me all these limitations, but actually it was very stimulating because I suddenly didn't know how I was going to make this movie. And to paraphrase Philip Glass from his autobiography, he says, you know, if you know what you're going to do, the end result is not going to be very interesting. It's only when you don't know what you're going to do that something cool can happen. I did not want to do a Talking Heads documentary because otherwise it's just some, you know, old guy sitting behind a desk reminiscing, and that's not interesting. I really wanted to make you feel like you were in that time and place. And that meant choosing the right images and words that had some sort of resonance, but also allowed you as a viewer to sort of project yourself into that time. And frankly, just allow Barry's words to do their magic. I mean, it's all there on the page. I just tried to get out of the way, basically.
Yeah, and to have Willem Dafoe, Matt Dillon, and Lily Taylor, I'd love to hear from both of you or either of you, what do you think those particular performers bring to the material in their vocal performance?
Well, Willem is one of the great actors, and Matt has been doing this since he was 14 years old. Lily's a brilliant actress. And they really did love these stories. I mean, Willem and Matt were quite familiar with the material. I've been friends with both of them for a very long time. And they understood it, and they felt it. And they made time out of their own very busy schedules, you know, to read the stories, to do that. Because the one thing I said to Rob at the beginning, which I didn't mention before, is that you can make this film, but I don't want to be in it. So he managed to do it. I mean, I'm just there for a moment at the end, sitting at the desk, but I wanted other people to carry the ball in this case. I don't know any other way to say it, really. It's a difficult thing, you know. People have asked me over the years, are you going to write your memoirs? Are you going to write an autobiography? I've had a very interesting life. 3/4 of a century have passed since that time in 1946 when I was born. It's really remarkable. And, you know, it's kind of hard to believe. But I'm like B. Traven, who wrote Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and various other writers, said the truth is in the work. It doesn't matter what I say, because the only thing that's going to be left is the work itself. And if there's any truth to be told, or lessons to be learned, or any of that, I don't have an academic approach. I really didn't go to college. I'm generally, you know, an autodidact. I'm self-educated. This isn't braggadocio. It's just saying because I wanted to be free. I wanted to be out there in the world. And as it's said in the film, you know, I started working at the age of 11, and I started writing stories then, and I'm still basically writing the same thing now as I wrote then, except my grammar's a little better.
I'd love to know what you both or either of you think of the editing in this film. It struck me more than ever seeing it on the screen here. There's some really fascinating montages where you're blending archival footage, some stuff that looks like home movies, some stuff that's photography. There's one interesting shot of it's a child in like a devil mask, and then it fades into a photograph. What do you think about just in terms of what was that process like in terms of finding the right places to have moments like that, or just how this was cut together?
Well, first off, it's really too bad that my editor, Mariana, can't be here. When we started the film, she lived down in Pilsen, but it took us so long to make that now she lives in Montreal. So that was interesting. But to sort of answer your question, you know, casting the right actors is really important, but finding the right collaborators is also a kind of casting process. Because if you can find the right people to be part of your team, they will give you so much more than you could do on your own. And Mariana was totally in sync with what I wanted to do, which was, I feel like most documentaries show you too much. They bombard you with too much, and they don't really allow you to see what is in front of your eyes. So the two of us working together, our sort of approach was, let's not show the most, let's show the least. Let's show things that allow you to breathe as a viewer. So it was really about, you know, holding shots, finding the right place to cut from one thing to another, and just sort of through juxtaposition, you know, building a third thing between Barry's words, Jason's brilliant music, and, you know, whatever archival stuff that we found.
Yeah, it goes brilliantly with the music as well, a lot of those montages with the jazz. And I'd like to ask Barry if is there a particular story that is portrayed here in the film that it really struck you in terms of cinematically how it was brought to life? Is there one that you would single out, or do you see it more as just a full experience, just all in one?
Well, as I said, I thought that the film was brilliantly conceived. I think probably I can't say anything about, you know, what's the favorite part of the film, that kind of thing. It's just an overall feeling. But I think that Lily reading the story Chicago, Illinois, 1953, where the mother goes into the pharmacy and is mistakenly called a Negro. And as far as autobiography is concerned, this is a true story. And how true is it now? How much of it has changed? You know, I mean, we're in this particularly dangerous period in the history of this country. The two bêtes noires that I always have had in my writing has been racism and fundamentalist religion. You know, it's like my dad answering that question about religion. He said, well, your mother's a Catholic. As if, what's that? It's kind of how I feel, the same way. And so I think that that's a particularly significant story and especially relevant to the time now. And to have the brilliant animation and the wonderful, wonderful musical score by Jason. I mean, the movie wouldn't have been the same without that score. I mean, I'm particularly touched by it. And I think that's really the one thing. The others are amusing, bad girls, all that kind of thing. You know, but it's kind of funny because when you put together a film like this, I remember when David Lynch and I were writing a film called Lost Highway, and we wrote the first draft, and we each went away from each other and, you know, to think about it and reread it and all that stuff. And we both disliked it, the first draft, really. And we both said the same thing, it's too funny. We had too much humor in it. And there was some really funny shit in there. I mean, I can't even begin to describe it now. But it was amusing and all, but it wasn't really the story we needed to tell, or how we wanted to tell the story, that kind of thing. So we, you know, had to rewrite. We had to go after it. I have no idea how Rob wrote this film. I've never seen anything on paper. I really didn't know anything about it. And actually, this is the first time I've seen it in this form. So it's very touching to me, of course, as it would to any of you, you know, to have the same kind of thing done. It touches all of these feelings, you know. My brother, Marky, is here with me tonight, and it's the first time he's seen it as well. And so, you know, it's very meaningful in that sense, and to be back in Chicago for me, I haven't been here very many times since I was 17. And it all still feels the same. My wife and I, Mary Lou and I, were taking a little stroll around today and, you know, through the neighborhood, not my neighborhood, but close by. And it's very hard to explain how it feels. I'm sure it's happened to a great many of you. You can't go home again. So that's where I'm at with this, and I'm thankful, you know, that Rob made this record of that time and place. So it's really beyond my life, and in fact, nobody needs to have ever read any of my novels or seen any of my films that I've been involved with or anything, because it's really a portrait of what goes in to the making of a writer. And I'm glad of that. That's the point here. You know, what sticks with you? And I'm sure there are a number of you who are filmmakers here. Certainly you're interested in movies or you wouldn't be here. And you're writers and artists and composers and all of that. And you all know how tough it is. As I've said before, you know, how do you get to this point? I mean, curiosity is part of it. And then there's risk. And if you really want to be successful, you have to have a pretty good imagination. And that's really the heart of the matter. And I think you've just seen a pretty good portrayal of that.
You mentioned Lost Highway, and I'm going to open up for questions now, but I'll just say Robert Blake's Mystery Man is pictured on a tip jar in the lobby, which I thought was a nice touch. Just realized. Any questions? Any people? I sit right there in the middle there.
Does somebody have a microphone out there? No? Or, yeah, stand up and
I'll
say it.
translate.
It's hard to hear.
Yeah, I was wondering about seeing with your other situation in the drugstore. Now, Chicago's noted for this anyway, this kind of racism that creeps out now and then like it does. And I'm kind of curious, was your mother actually aware that she was passing?
That
Was your mother aware that she was passing is the question.
my mother wasn't passing. She just had a tan. She was dark because we were living in Key West, Florida. And, I was spending a lot of time there. And, no, she wasn't passing. Somebody just mistook her, for being black because she was so dark in the winter, in the middle of the winter, and everybody else was pasty white, and that's all. So I think you misunderstood that part. Or, it wasn't made clearly enough by myself or by Rob. So we'll take the responsibility for that. But thanks for the question.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Yes. Right there.
Was that animation rotoscoped, or was it all like fresh from its can?
Was the animation rotoscoped or was it?
Lily Carre was the first animator who came on board, and originally she was going to do all the animation because, as one learns as a filmmaker, whenever you start out a project, you're completely naive about how much work it's going to take and how long it's going to take. Later we realized that she couldn't do all of it, so she recommended Kevin Eskew to do a sequence. And very purposefully, I did not show, I did not allow them to share work, because I wanted each animator to take their own approach. Lily's animation, black and white, was all done freehand, and I wanted it to have a look kind of like cheap newsprint, like the black is sort of bleeding into the whites and the grays, and that was all Lily's brilliance. For Kevin's sequence, which mostly takes place in Graceland, I was basically trying to rip off Yellow Submarine, which is one of my favorite movies, especially the stuff in that film which is rotoscoped. So whatever year that was that 2018, I think? It was basically the last day of fall before the snow fell. And I just went to Graceland with my cell phone and just took a bunch of videos walking around. And I gave all this stuff to Kevin, and I was like, maybe you could do some rotoscoping, and I wanted a sort of stream of consciousness feel. Roy and these girls walking through Graceland, and things are floating through his mind while they're talking. And so he just did a brilliant job of incorporating some of the stuff that I shot, along with a bunch of, random footage that I sent him or pictures that I thought might be inspirational.
It's one of the best visualizations I can think of a memory, trying to recall a memory and everything else in your head kind of, entangled within it. It's just wonderful. Any other questions? Anything else? If we have a little more time, if no one else has a hand up right now, just the fact this is the Chicago Critics Film Festival, and Barry, you're free to say, no, I'd rather not discuss this now, but for our interview, you did mention a wonderful story about Gene Siskel. I'm not wondering if you'd like to mention a bit of that, just because, again, having a critic audience, it's I feel like people would be interested in however much you'd like to share.
Well, it's maybe a bit too long to go into here. It's really funny, but I did know Gene, and we had really been at Cambridge University together in 1966, very briefly. And actually, he reminded me then that we had actually been in kindergarten together at Clinton School. Of course, I didn't remember any of this. In any event, it was just a short time spent in England in that time, so we got to know each other. He was a pretty funny character, and really, pompous but funny. And we had a good time, basically. And then many years passed. And in Cannes, in France, just before the film Wild at Heart was about to be shown at 2 o'clock in the morning, because we were checking the opticals and all that just to run through before the following night, which was when it was going to be shown in the competition for the festival. Just a very few of us, like 5 or 6 people, were going to be together in the theater. And this 1,500 seat theater. And then one of the producers, Monty Montgomery, came up to me and he said, listen, Gene Siskel, the critic from Chicago, and his wife are here, but they have to leave tomorrow, and you know, he needs to see the film. And so we're allowing him to come in and watch the film with us. He says, but listen, can you do us a favor, because we're all busy with this, that, and the other, and can you meet Gene Siskel at midnight on the terrazza, on the terrace of the Hotel Martinez? I said, sure. He said, do you know what he looks like? I said, I do. And by now, of course, you know, Gene had become this television critic and personality and all that kind of thing. And he and Roger Ebert, of course, had this long-running famous show. So in any case, midnight comes along. I'm sitting on the terrace, the bar, in the bar at the Hotel Martinez. And here comes Gene and his wife. Well, when we were at Cambridge, Gene used to keep a diary. And he addressed himself every day when he kept his diary. And he named himself the Unit. And he would, this is crazy, but it's true. And he would write every day, you know, the Unit awoke at 6 a.m. He put his left sock on before he put the right sock on. I mean, it was really this pedestrian and awful. And we thought he was nuts, and you know, this was like crazy, but it was funny, like I said. But he was writing, and so in any case, we all began to call him the Unit, because that's how he addressed himself. The only other person I ever knew who did this was the writer William Saroyan. He kept a diary, and he addressed himself every day, "Dear Bill." He started. This is true, and. So I knew Saroyan the last few years of his life, and he was pretty funny and pretty crazy too. In any case, here comes Siskel and his wife, and you know, he looked like a giraffe kind of. You know, he had the head leaning back and stuff like that. So I was with this documentary filmmaker, Heidi Draper, who was a wonderful musicologist and stuff. And anyway, she was coming along with us. And I got up and I said, "Hey, Unit, Unit, over here." And so Gene, at first he didn't react, and I said, "Unit." And he turned and he looked, and he was just below me, and he suddenly recognized me, and it had been since 1966. This was 1990. And he looked at me and pointed at me and he said, "Oh my God, it's you." Barry Gifford, you know, he hadn't put it together yet. And so he was just gobsmacked, as I said. You know, I mean, he couldn't believe it. And, you know, we went ahead to the theater, and it was very polite and all that sort of stuff. But it was very funny. And so that's the short version that I'll give you. But he actually was a pretty sweet guy, you know, and he took being made fun of very well. I have to say that. At least by me. What was he going to do to me?
I love that story. Well, I think that's the time. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Rob, for being here. Thank you all for being here.
I wanted to mention real quick that we do have copies of some of Barry's books that you can get in the lobby, and then we've also got a movie poster that you can get to, and I'm sure that Barry would be happy to autograph for you. So, thanks again for coming.